Good evening. Welcome to our Thursday, October 20th work session, open to the public, and we will be live streaming it. Those of you that are watching from home, it looks a little different tonight. So we've invited administrators to come up as they wish and sit with us so that they can see the presentation better. We will do our call to order and our roll call now for board members and administrators. So we'll start with board members, beginning over here.
Diane Potter.
Tony Lee.
Becky Fless.
Chris McGowan.
Nicole Medore.
Matt Lillibridge.
Administrators.
Beth Hopkins, Superintendent. Angela Harvey, Director of Curriculum.
Alicia Morris, Director of Special Services. Nicole Barton, Assistant Principal at HT.
Katie Gould, Principal at Helen Thompson School.
Jared Dumas, Assistant Principal at GHS.
Vicki Duguay, Building Principal at Riverview Community School.
Tiffany Cockrell, Interim Principal at Pittston Randolph Consolidated School.
Karen Moody, Building Principal of War Richard School.
Chad Kempton, High School Principal.
Thank you so much.
And Terry McGuire.
Oh, and Terry McGuire. Without Terry, we would not be here, in your view. Tonight, we have a presentation being presented to us by Healthy Communities of the Capital Area, and it is the Maine Integrated Youth Survey for the 2021 year, and it's the data around that. So I'd like to introduce Joanne
Joy
Joy
and Patricia Welton,
Hi.
who both work for Healthy Communities of the Capital Area, or HCCA, as we often refer to them. And they are intimately familiar with the data, and they're going to present the findings to you.
And it's a long sentence. It's very complicated when you say it. Healthy Communities of the Capital Area, Maine Integrated Youth Survey. Yeah, so thank you both for being here. It needs an acronym.
It's HCCA and MIAS.
It does.
There you go.
I just didn't put it on.
And just for you, Becky.
Just to make me trip over my tongue. Appreciate that. So we'll turn it over to you. And let's begin. And thank you both for being here very much.
Okay. See if this works the first time out here.
So Patricia and I will actually go back and forth between the slides. I've had more experience with using the data, describing the data. Patricia has a lot more experience working with community members and the population in the 4 towns that make up MSAD11, as well as some of our other communities. I do want to make sure that folks know that the data that we're going to be showing you tonight is the middle school and the high school. There are additional questions asked at lower grades, but they're not the same kind of questions. So you do have access to those questions, but it's quite a different set of information.
And I want to make sure everyone knows about Garden Area Thrive. So we have a drug-free communities grant that actually Pat and other staff members helped us write 3.5 years ago. And we have it specifically for MSAD11 high school and middle school. So this grant works with the community. We have sector representatives from all around the community, and we work on substance use prevention for the youth. And we also work with protective factors. And in the last couple of years, because of COVID, it's really been concentrated on making sure that the community knows that the kids need to know that they matter. So we've been doing some projects downtown, and now that the Boys and Girls Club is open, we're going to be doing a specific project with them. And we're doing specific projects with the kids up at the high school, finally. So unfortunately, we're into the grant 2.5 years, and we haven't really been able to get our boots on the ground, but we are this year. So and Joanne is going to tell you about the nesting dolls.
So I start almost every presentation about substance use or any kind of behavior change with usually the nesting dolls in my hands. Because very often we think of the individual people as being responsible for their behavior. And if you want to change your behavior, it's up to you. Just do it. We have that swoosh and all of that. But we actually know that what somebody knows and believes is greatly influenced by the social network. So each individual is nested within a social network. That social network could be a church, it could be your friends, it could be a team, it could be people at school, it could be who you hang with after school. It could be people that play golf with on the weekend. All of us have social networks. That's the biggest influence on whether or not children do healthy behaviors or unhealthy behaviors. If you wanted to quit smoking, it depends really a lot on who you hang out with. If you wanted to quit, if you don't want to start an unhealthy behavior, it really makes a difference about those people around you and what they do. We also know each of those social networks is within an organization, so church or school, whatever, within a community. So people experience life differently in Gardner than they do in Portland. You know, there are different environments, et cetera. We're all nestled inside the environment itself. So it's the laws of the state, the climate, all of those things. So all of those factors influence the behavior of the individual. And all of those factors need to change and support kids or adults in order to support healthy behavior. So we are not saying in any of this data, we're not pointing fingers at parents or at the kids or at the school. We are saying this just is as it is now. And Drug-Free Communities Coalition really helps look at all of those layers of the community to make changes, not just at the school, although the school is really an important factor. Next slide. So the Maine Integrated Youth Health Survey is administered every 2 years. And we do grades 7 through 12, and we're doing the same set of questions since 2009. Before that, there was a federal CDC risk behavior that we did. This includes both national and state validated questions, which means we expect the questions to tell us what we asked. You know, even though there is some people who will try to fool you with their answers, there's enough checks and balances to find out and throw out those answers and that data. The data are used to understand youth health needs. And this one says progress. Sometimes it's progress and sometimes it's not. You can see trends over time about, you know, is there more tobacco use? Is there less tobacco use? We've done a lot of that data around tobacco in particular. So the schools are invited to participate, and they really push hard to make sure that they have a diverse group of schools so they're not all the same kind of kids or not all the same income. But all schools are invited to participate, and the state wants every single school system, if at all possible. It helps the state, the schools, the communities write grants, because then you have the data of how many people are using substances or healthy or eating fruits or vegetables, et cetera. So it really provides solid data. And the student data is weighted by demographic characteristics to match the representation in the entire population. So we have a few acronyms. MIAS is the Maine Integrated Youth Health Survey. We use GRMS throughout because that's the way the data was collected. So that's the middle school, 7th and 8th grade only. And if anybody is calling in, that's making sure that they know that it's 7th and 8th grade. And of course, GAHS is the high school. So there are a couple of things you need to know since the survey was administered in November and December of 21. The legislature now refers to marijuana as cannabis in official communications. So we may use the language back and forth, but you're likely to start hearing almost exclusively cannabis if we're talking about medical, stores, retailers, laws, et cetera. And the survey was administered in the fall because of COVID. So we expect some questions to be answered differently because it was done in the fall when usually it's done in February and March. So the high school, there are a few sections of the data that's the high school only. There are some questions asked at the high school and not at the middle school. So 51% are female, 49% are male. There were 476 students that participated, by the way, in this survey. 22% of the entire high school body in November of 21 identified as gay, lesbian, or bisexual. We have seen this increase in kids identifying as GLD, quite a bit over time. This is the highest rate so far, and it's statewide. It's not different in one part of the state than in another. 4% are unsure of their sexual identity. We now have a little over 3% who identify as transgender. So that is up from 1.6 in 2019. And if you ask who's unsure of whether or not they're transgender, we bump up to over 6% now. 2% speak a language other than English at home. And there's no race or ethnicity data shared because the population is so small. We don't want to break out any of the data and point the finger. So we're going to start with a couple of questions around COVID, and then we have several things about physical activity and nutrition. And largely these questions are included in this presentation because both COVID and how healthy you eat and how much physical activity you get and how much sleep you get are risk factors for substance use and for behavioral health issues. So even though we're really not doing a lot around physical activity and nutrition, we would be remiss if we didn't say something about the fact that if you're physically active and if you're eating healthy, the mental health seems to be a lot better and the substance use tends to decrease as well. Same way goes for sleep. The two COVID questions are, do you agree or disagree that doing your homework, your schoolwork was more difficult during the COVID pandemic than before? So the blue is the middle school, the gray is the high school. And as you can see, a lot of kids found it a lot more difficult to do the schoolwork during COVID. The second one is how often was your mental health not good? So that tends to ask about stress, anxiety, depression, those kinds of things. And again, we had a pretty significant amount of kids responding that their mental health was not good. Turning to the physical activity and nutrition ones. So 2019 was the last time we did the full survey, and 2021 was the November one. Actually, some of these things are a little better. So more fruit, at least as many vegetables, fewer sugar sweetened drinks, and the physical activity, being active for at least an hour a day, are about the same. Now, even though they haven't changed that much, this is not great news, folks. We've got about a third of the kids having a piece of fruit a day. And we've got, just a little more than half having a vegetable. So this is not your 5 a day, which actually should be 7 or 9. And what I think is interesting is the sugar sweetened drinks did drop, and that maybe there is some speculation that that's because the kids were home and the parents weren't buying the soda, or the kids were not out and about as much buying their own. Yes,
Are we allowed to ask questions?
sure.
Because I was surprised that the only one beverage a week, and possibly I would assume that maybe they misunderstood and it was one a day
It could,
type of thing.
actually, a lot of kids have changed their drinking habits over the last 10 years. A lot of kids have. So I didn't even question this data.
Yeah, I'm not questioning data. I was just,
Yeah.
I was very surprised. I'm not surprised by not being active.
The
in my
next,
house.
the next slide is on the high school. Same data, fruits and vegetables. The high school kids are a little bit more likely to have fruits and vegetables, but the other data is very similar. And 1 hour of physical activity a day, 40% of the kids are having this. At this point, I'd like to really look at who's not doing the healthy choice. So, and yes, please feel free to either ask where the data came from. We have the questions written down in our notes. So if there's something you'd like a little clarification about. So in the youth substance use, all of this is self-reported. And I don't think I said that clearly at the beginning. Every question is, in your opinion, what do you do? It is not, there's nobody else reporting for them. This is their self-report. So here we are at the middle school, and this is in your lifetime, have you used these substances? And at the 7th and 8th grade level, you have 1 in 5 in 2019 that used alcohol, but only 15% in 2021. Marijuana also had dropped a little bit, although 13 to 11, you know, it's not a really big jump. It's not like you can say, woohoo, we got that whipped. Vaping, the question was not asked in the prior year, in the prior set of questions. Vaping did not ask if it was nicotine. So we do know in the high school, the question was asked about vaping. The last time you vaped, did you believe it was nicotine or cannabis or something else? And so only at the high school do we know that the last time they used what they thought it was. And cigarettes is 3%. Prescription drugs that they were not prescribed, I think is of concern at this age, at any age.
What happened to cigarette on the last slide? What happened to cigarettes for 2021?
They probably didn't ask that question on the new one.
On this,
Yeah, so what happens is that we have a set number of questions, and if you add one, you have to take one away. So it may be at the middle school that's what they do.
Vaping's taking place in the time, so.
Yeah. Oops.
Yeah.
They both say middle school.
His voice.
Okay, thanks. So here's the high school. This is lifetime. So lifetime can be interpreted as experimentation. This is not, you know, I've been drinking my whole life. It is sometime in my life, I have had at least one drink, or at least once in my life, I've used marijuana or vape. So we look at this lifetime use to see who's already experimenting. And at the high school level, we have about 50% with alcohol, 40% with marijuana, and almost 40% with vaping. And again, we do not know with this data whether that vaping was nicotine or cannabis.
What was the grades of the students that took this?
So the middle
At the high
school,
school.
the middle school is 7 and
9
8.
through
That one is 9, 10, 11, and 12.
Everybody, okay.
Yeah. So we'll show you a couple of these data slides by grade in a minute, and you'll see the difference at in the high school grades. I don't think we have all the data for the middle school, but we do by the high school grades.
When you talk about the percentages of marijuana and cigarettes and then vaping, is one of those most concerning? Is vaping most concerning than the other two?
So there are consequences of vaping that people don't know about. So
Right.
vaping adds an additional boost to both nicotine and to marijuana.
Okay.
So by vaping, they have changed the impact of the substance on their physical being and on their minds. So both are less, well, we can't say better or worse, but they're more intense, more complicated. And the majority of those folks in the 2019, so we don't have this data for the 2021, but like 70% of smokers were also, tobacco smokers were also marijuana smokers. And about 83% of marijuana smokers were also tobacco smokers. So we know there's somewhere between a 70 and 83% crossover where there's co-use. And we do know that co-use of tobacco and marijuana really ups the impact of both substances.
And then maybe turning to something else.
Well, even if they don't turn to something else, they're
Well, it's
already
bad.
addicted.
Right. But all of it's bad, but
Right, yes.
okay, thank you.
We do not necessarily know that then moves on to something else. We do know it is very common that tobacco is used before any other substance. Interesting. Partly because it's the easier one to get. Partly because you don't get thrown in jail for it. You know, you don't have an OU nicotine. You know, so some of that, but it's also part of the reason is that nicotine is as addictive as some of the opiates. So nicotine, most people who use nicotine are hooked very quickly. females before males. Females are addicted faster, body structure hormones, all of that. But yeah, so heroin and nicotine have very similar addictive properties. So
That's
you opened up, if you start using tobacco, you kind of open up those receptors that say, give me more, no matter what it might be. But the common co-use in school is marijuana and nicotine.
I know you're not showing us the breakdown, but did you guys, because you're just demonstrating it, but did the data break down by year group, like 23% alcohol, freshman, sophomore, junior,
You'll
senior?
see that.
We got a couple slides on that data, sure.
I'm so anxious.
Here we go.
So, here we go. Just for you, we just threw it in there. So in 7th grade, alcohol is 7%. I was 1%. In 8th grade, it's 6%. We are quite concerned about the leap from 6 to 17% that goes between 8th grade and freshman year.
Wow.
And then this is high school, yeah.
I know, welcome to high
Oh, yeah.
school.
What we would like to point out to folks is that this really high peak was done in November of 21. So these are your seniors a year ago.
And they just got back from COVID.
And right. So we don't know how much impact is coming back to school. We don't know if it's the personality of the class. I mean, we do know every now and then there's a class that is outstanding in some way or another. So this is alcohol. So I want you to know that it's 20, 31, and 24. You know, and, the next one is marijuana.
Yeah.
So what do we got? 16, 20, 38. And 20. The first two percentages, middle school, are not that different. But we have that same group of 11th graders of last year, 38%. Now this is at least one day in the past 30 days. So the data we're showing you both with the alcohol, these are no longer the lifetime uses. These are people who have been using in the last 30 days. Oh, and look at tobacco. So this is actually a mixed kind of response because the gray bar is specifically smoked cigarettes. And we know that smoking cigarettes is fairly low, I mean, compared to some of the other tobacco products being used. We do not know, just from this data, whether the vapor product was nicotine or cannabis. But we do know there's a bunch of vaping going on. Here we have 11% even at the 8th grade. So we've got, more than 1 out of 10. At 9th grade, we got almost a quarter. 10th grade, we got, 20%. And then, here we have over a third in the 11th grade class vaping, but they're also smoking at a very high rate. 14% is way higher than the rest of their cohorts, that high school cohort.
Did you happen to bring any devices?
I don't have any
Vaping
products,
devices?
but I got pictures with explanations. Because the products that April bought 2.5 years ago when we were doing this, they're all gone by the wayside, basically. And the new marijuana products are something that everybody needs to know what they look like, and I've got pictures of those.
Okay, thank you.
So the past, we also thought it was important to really look at the substance use by the sex of the kids. And we are inclusive from middle school through high school here on all males and all females. So there's a little bump in alcohol by the girls, a little bump in tobacco by the boys, a little bump in marijuana by the boys and prescription drugs, but vaping is a big bump with the females. There is national research that shows alcohol was marketed strongly over COVID to both young women and older women. So there's a lot of data across the country that shows not only are young girls, high school girls, students, middle school kids impacted by the advertising, so are a lot of young mothers. Yeah. So there's a lot higher use rates of alcohol by women during COVID and beyond.
So I thought I'd show you, this is why girls are more attracted. Most of these products are very girly. And they are, the kids see these on their social media. And it's interesting if you sit down with them with their laptops or their iPads, these are the kind of products you're gonna see coming across the screen. So they're definitely targeting young girls. And even in the flavors, this is the liquid nicotine. So they're bright colored and cool and yummy.
And they taste like?
Yeah, I
those
guess.
things?
And then this is the biggest problem is you have these Instagram, TikTok influences out there. And these are the top 10 favorite vape girls on Instagram. So that's where we have a real battle, unless you really have some safety mechanisms on your computers and on your phones and on your devices to see what the kids are looking at. This is where the girls are going, to these influencers.
So we also look at what the risk factors are for substance use. And I do want to remind people that poor nutrition, not a lot of physical activity, not sleeping are high risk factors, but so are adverse childhood experiences. So is there anybody here in the room that doesn't understand what adverse childhood experiences is? I don't want to go on about it if people really know. So adverse childhood experiences are, pretty much did big challenges happen in your life? Was a parent sent to jail? Did you have to move? Did your parents get divorced? I mean, they do not necessarily have to be what we consider traumatic, but they are what cause trauma in a child's life. And 4 or more adverse childhood experiences reported at the middle and high school level really show that they've had a lot going on for them, and there will be impacts. The research shows there will be impacts in your health, in your decision-making, et cetera, from these adverse childhood experiences. Now, 29% of your 476 kids is 138 kids. So you have 138 kids in the high school. And I wouldn't be surprised if adverse childhood experiences were even higher in some of the lower grades, considering the opiate epidemic and the impact on families in this area. So these are some of those experiences. 23% have thought about leaving home because of violence or threat of violence in your home. Now, this is high school, so almost a quarter have considered living home because of threats or real violence. So that's what your kids are experiencing. 40% have lived at some time in their life with somebody with an alcohol or drug problem. 1% reported unstable housing in the past month. So this is not lifetime. 32% of the high school kids are having sexual intercourse, and the statewide data shows that there's not a lot of protection, not a lot of condoms, not a lot of safe sex going on. And then 8% actually reported offensive racial comments or being attacked at school. Now, we don't know how many kids identified as another race, but we know 8% of the high school identified as being bullied. I suspect there's not much difference between that number bullied and the number who are present in the school system. So this is a hard question to help. The question asks the kids, what's your perception of your parents' assessment of risks? So this is how it's worded. How wrong do your parents feel it would be for you to have 1 or 2 drinks of an alcoholic beverage nearly every day? These are the ones that said, oh, there's nothing wrong with that, right? 6% in 2019 and 3% in 2020 said, oh yeah, my parents don't feel anything wrong with that. 1 or 2 drinks a day. Yeah, several days a week.
For the kids.
But yeah. How wrong do your parents feel it would be for you to have 1 or 2 drinks of an alcoholic beverage nearly every day? Yeah, my parents wouldn't care.
Take the edge.
And then the similar question is, how wrong do your parents feel it would be for you to use marijuana? And even then, we're at 11% in 2019, and it's dropped down to 7%.
That's middle school.
So youth police about substance use, no risk. So these are the kids' own beliefs of whether there's risk or not. So binge alcohol is at least 5 drinks at a sitting. So, right, yeah.
Well, I gotta lay down.
So, and it says 5 or more drinks of an alcoholic beverage in a row, once or twice a week. So, do you think there's any risk in that? Only 15 and 19%. They said there's no risk or only a slight risk of harm of that. It's very clear that there's no understanding of alcohol poisoning for one thing. Because at a high school or middle school age, alcohol poisoning based on weight and size and all that. However, so this is like alcohol. There's no risk or only a slight risk of harm with marijuana. 75% of the kids think there's no risk. Marijuana. None. Zip, zilch. Once or twice a week. I mean, 75%. And then we have prescription drugs that 9%.
So needless to say, that's where I'm gonna give you some examples and try to bring you guys up to speed to Cannabis 2022. So Cannabis 2022, so I'm 60, who here is over the age of 35? Is everybody over 35? Okay, so in high school, all of us of 35 and older, marijuana, if you were lucky, was 4%. It was a lucky day, it was 4%. This is weed that comes off the plant at 23%. That's coming off the plant. So the product in 2022 is a world of difference. And so when you hear parents, and this is what I'm trying to get out into the community, it's not just weed. And I know that that's what Chad hears on a regular basis. It's just weed. It's just weed. Now, then we have these are edibles. So those little chunks of candy and the little gummy worm back there, those are 10% THC each. So they're not always packaged looking like that. Sometimes they're packaged looking like the gummy bear and looking like the fish and looking like the worms. And they're 10% THC each. Now, if you buy them at an adult use recreation store, which we have regulated, there are warnings on the back of them. There are signs on the back of the package that say, go slow. You know, wait, take one, wait. Some of the medical stores have that labeling, not all. We have a real two diverse businesses. So adult use marijuana is 21 and older, and they're really good. You can test it out yourself, go and check these shops out. They card you the minute you come in the door. You have to give them your license when you come to the door. Medical marijuana follows very different rules, and it's 18. And you see the signs in downtown Gardner, you see the signs in Farmingdale, come in, set up an appointment, and you can get your card. And 18-year-olds can go in and get their card without parental supervision. It would be interesting if you all went in one of those shops and see what it requires to get your medical card. It's not a law anymore. When medical marijuana first became law, there were, I think, 4 things that you could get medical marijuana for. Glaucoma, being ill when you're in chemo, and some other types of drug interactions that they were trying to help you for, epilepsy and things like that. There were 4 things that you could get marijuana for. Now it's a backache, your period, you can't sleep, you got headaches,
You're pregnant.
you're
and have
pregnant,
nausea.
you're pregnant and you have nausea. That is just like, right now, all of us in public health are going, what? So that's a whole other issue around doctors who aren't educated yet, who are saying it's okay for moms to smoke. So then we have not only of these items in the stores, we have very easy, you look on YouTube and you can make these at home, of course. So we've had this experience where kids are bringing in sheets of brownies. Well, you're only supposed to have a little bit. How much do you think they're actually eating? So what EMTs and what the emergency rooms are seeing around edible poisonings is that the kids they're not educated enough to know just one. No, Nothing happens within 30 minutes, I'm gonna pop another one. Oh, that didn't catch up either, I'm gonna pop another one. And by then, they've got 30% THC in their systems and they're ill. And if you ask your kiddos, all my kids are in their late 20s, early 30s, and I've had a couple of experiences where they said, I am never doing that again, because you don't sleep when that happens. And it really, really gets into your system. So this is the new product that's out in the last year and a half. This is made right here in Maine. It's highbrow. It's a THC infused drink. We just did focus groups down in Augusta. We'll be doing focus groups. It's called a community mapping project with our Keystone group over here and see what they tell us. But the kids down in Augusta tell us that this is their favorite product and very easy to get. This product has over 10% THC in it and it acts very quickly. And they can get their hands on it very easily because 18 medical marijuana store. And if you, again, pay attention to what's on the advertisings, you go in there and you get a product. Most of the time you go out with a free product. So you buy one, you get one free. You buy, and that's the way it's going. So in Augusta, that's what they're dealing with. Then we have the oils. The oils that go in the marijuana vape pens start at 30% THC. So when you have more THC than you have CBD, that's where you're going to see that kids are really being affected by it. And they're very stoned. They usually have some other physical affect of it, numbed out. Girls have issues around anxiety. They feel like their heart's coming out of their chest. And again, this is one of those things that if you buy it at an adult recreation store, they're going to say, yeah, you just need one hit of that. Kids don't know that. So they're puffing on that pen. And then to make matters even worse, they're mixing nicotine oil with the cannabis oil. So talk about a nice little chemical stew that they have going on in their bodies. And then the last one is this. This is very dangerous. This is called shatter or wax. This is 80% THC. You can buy it at the stores. It is toxic, and the people who smoke this know on a regular basis know they have to be grounded. There's no driving. I mean, you're in it for the night. And unfortunately, in YouTube, April and I looked at this in the office one day, and YouTube has it all over there, teaching the kids how to do it. It's very easy to get instruction. This looks like they're smoking opioids, because you have to take that product, put it on a spoon and light it, and then you puff it up. So that's not weed. So my next one is, this is what you're going to see on a more regular basis. In our age, it was a joint. It's not a joint anymore. It's a joint, it's a spliff, or it's a blunt. And this is what they look like. So this is a joint, this one up here, and the joint contains cannabis. It's paper wrapped and it's cigarette sized. The spliff, I gotta move my thing here. The spliff is the middle one, and the spliff has cannabis, has tobacco, it's paper wrapped, and it's a cigarette sized. And the third one is a blunt. The blunt is what you see in all of the shops being advertised, and normally it's a buy two, get two around in the shops. So the blunt contains cannabis and tobacco, it's leaf wrapped, and it's a cigar size, a small Tipperillo, you know what those used to be. And those are sold in 6-packs, like you would like a pack of cigarettes when you go into the shops. And the average, I'll just tell you the average purchase price of anybody going into the stores, I should have put that screen up there because that would really baffle you, is any time someone goes into a store, it's at least $65. That's the average. It's generally like in the $125 range every time someone goes into one of the stores. So it's expensive. And I don't know how they're getting their hands on it unless they're working and doing that. But again, the adult use market is 21 plus, but it's the medical stores that we really need to keep an eye on. And if kids have their medical card, we need to know why they have it, and as parents, and do some guidance around that.
I just want to add that we did some focus groups in the last year in Kennewick County and Knox and Walden. And all of the focus groups, the kids said, the places they get their marijuana is older friends, parents, and their parents. A significant amount of the marijuana. And they said occasionally somebody just goes in and buys it. Somebody's not checking IDs, et cetera. But everybody, all of the focus groups reported my friends' parents, older friends. And then my parents were after the other kids' parents. Then we're not going to throw their own parents under the bus. They're going to start with the friends.
Yeah, because everyone can have 3 plants in the yard at
Yeah.
full growth and 3 coming up. And so that's it.
So, so let's go back a little bit to the data. It's always shocking to me, the products. It's always shocking about how many more products they are, whether it's tobacco or alcohol or marijuana. There are just so many more products. This is youth perception from 7th grade through 12th grade on whether or not these substances are very or somewhat risky. The first one is alcohol. The darker color is marijuana. So starting at 7th grade, if you just look at marijuana first, the perception of it being very risky or somewhat risky is significantly lower, even starting at 7th grade. So the kids in 7th grade and 8th grade, 55 and 52, drop significantly about if it's very or somewhat risky at the high school. Only, a little more than a third think it's risky as freshmen, and it drops all the way to only 16% think it's very or somewhat risky. So this is somewhat concerning. And if you look at alcohol, where we have almost the same use rate between alcohol and marijuana, the kids, however, know that it's risky to use alcohol. And even though they may be using in the last month, they have a very different understanding. We don't ask at all on the MIAS how much you're using, other than the binge drinking. Is binge drinking risky or not? But we don't ask them if they binge drank in the last month or so. So this is, again, why we look at marijuana a lot in Maine in general, because there is that concern that between the attempts at legalization of medical marijuana and then that followed by legalization of recreational, the advertising, et cetera, has been adult use is safe. And there hasn't been a counter position where anybody says, but it's very dangerous for youth. Marijuana is very dangerous for brain development before you're 20, before you're 25. And that is a big gap in between the legalizing the medical and recreational adult use. Here again is a very interesting statistic, easy to get. So this is alcohol in the first set of bars and marijuana. And at the middle school, even at the middle school, a third of the kids are saying it's easy to get alcohol. Now it may be that there's a bottle of wine in their refrigerator, a beer. It doesn't mean it's necessarily easy to get at a restaurant or whatever, but a third of them are saying it's easy to get. More than half of the high school kids say it's easy to get alcohol. And marijuana, it's harder to get marijuana at the middle school level, but it's not that hard when you're in high school. So again, over 50% of the kids say it's easy to get either alcohol or marijuana.
So I wanted to give you a little example of what markets are doing to alcohol for our young girls. So this is what we've always seen, all sorts of beer, alcoholic drinks. And then the new product that came along about 10 years ago, and we see them all over the street. We see them down on the waterfront, and we see all the guys going to Bath Iron Works, shopping and getting their bucket as they go to work. Nips, and the nips are everywhere. And unfortunately, even working with the stores, you cannot get them away from the counters. We have tried. If there's going to be another round of that, we've got more money in prevention around alcohol, and we're going to be working hopefully with Walgreens and Walmart and the convenience stores to get those things away from the front of the counter where you see them all the time. Like, I don't know if you know, at Walgreens, it's not only nips, but it's the small wine bottles. So it's not necessarily that they're buying them, they're walking out with them. But then the new products in the last couple of years have really focused on girls and women. So the girls are seeing the seltzers, all the different brands are now selling the seltzers because they're so popular. Then hard cider, and even in the ads, all the ads that I saw around the local ciders, it was girls and women having cider, and of course the wine. So the marketing, just like with the vapes, is really turned to girls. And on a national level, we are seeing that women and girls are, they're drinking more than the men and the boys are now.
So we'll switch back to looking at the data. And so this is mental health related data. And the sad and hopeless question is, have you any time in the last 12 months been so sad and hopeless for over 2 weeks or more, that you stop doing your regular behavior, your normal behavior? And at the middle school, we have over a third who actually for more than 2 weeks stops their usual behaviors, and 40% at the high school. What also is of huge concern is during the same time period, the suicidal ideation has really leaped up. And there was another question about a plan. So there's a little less than half that number who actually made a plan in the last year to commit suicide. So these, of course, all linked together. And the use of substances, whether it's alcohol, tobacco, or marijuana, or prescriptions, are very often an effort to, you know, self-medicate your mood, either to be happier if you're happy, or to not be so sad if you're sad. So that's true for adults as well as for youth. So we are very pleased that Gardner Middle School and Gardner High School have very high rates of kids feeling safe in school. This is very good. We do have some concern, of course, that there's 12% that still don't. But we do have kids reporting being bullied on school property. So at the middle school, this looks like a very high percentage. Middle school kids have a difficult time sorting out when somebody's being mean, you know, or when they're actually getting bullied. So it's hard to really tease out at this percentage of 41% of kids being bullied on school property, how much of that is their interpretation of what a bully is. I think that may be somewhat present also in the high school data, but way less. I mean, I think high school kids are much more able to discern, you know, who's just being a mean person and who's really bullying. Protective factors. So family support is like the #1 protective factor, folks. If we could do nothing else besides just help parents have the opportunity to support their kids once a week, you know, that would be remarkable. Because even though these are high, parents talk about what I'm doing at school, 81 and 82%. It didn't necessarily say, and they said I was doing good. Or, you know, there may be some negative stuff, but it's better for parents to be talking about something rather than nothing about school. And then we see some of that slightly difference in the family gives love and support. So there's a 5% difference between parents talk about what you're doing at school and then give you love and support. So that may be some of that. They talk about it, but they're not happy. Adults in school, other adults. So we put out the entire language of the questions here because it's, kind of confusing. So how often do adults in your school address conflict, negative language, and bullying in positive ways to help students? This is a third, whether you're at 2019 or 2021. And that 2019 data is a little higher. We suspect that that slight drop is COVID related. It's been hard to really assess what's going on in school after being home or being in and out. So this is of concern that the adults not addressing conflict, et cetera, in positive ways. How often does your school enforce rules fairly? Again, we're not up to 50%. We're closing in on 50%. But the whole fairness issue is a teen issue. Anyway, what is seen as fair? How is fairness conveyed? And do you agree or disagree that at least one of your teachers really cares and gives you help and support when you need it? This is another good number. That really 79 and 75% feel that there's at least one teacher that really cares. The flip side, of course, is that we still have a quarter of the kids who need a little bit more support and need to believe in them. So 39% said most or all of the time they feel people at the school care about the students and encourage them. This is lower than the state average. We don't compare us to the state average much because we're a little above, a little below. This seemed like a 6% difference when you average out all the schools that took the survey, that this most or all of the time feel people at school care about the students. This is something that is a combination, even this is a combination school and community issue, because if the parents aren't supportive of the school and the kid comes home with a challenge, so that plays out also as the kid not trusting people at school. So some of that is also a community issue, which we would like to be able to work on more, more positive messages to the community about the school. And 50% strongly agree that in your community, you feel like you matter to people. So this is actually up from a few years ago, but it's still lower than Maine's average. That's part of the reason that the Rotary is working on how do they support more kids. Gardner Main Street is doing things to invite youth to participate more, et cetera. But this is pretty concerning when we want our kids to grow up and be a part of the community. And it is perhaps an opportunity for the school and some community sectors to figure out more ways to interact. And I don't have a good example on the top of my head, but it might be something that town does at the park and the school helps lead it, or, just something that shows the kids that the community is doing something for them. Next slide.
That's it.
And that's it. So,
Yeah.
so we have given you 1 hour of data. What we would like you to do now is to really ask us any questions about, curriculum, or, there are strategies that the National Drug Institute has about curriculum, or, are there ways for law enforcement to be more interactive in the community? There are lots of things that are recommended in various curriculums, or is there ways to increase parents' knowledge about, I don't even know if this is a good idea, social emotional learning, another hot button language, we call it something else. But what are the ways that healthy communities and their drug-free communities group can support the school? Are there ways that we can be cross planning with the city? I know that the new library director, Justin,
We're doing lots with him.
is very open to having more things in the school. Not in the school, but for the school. And I believe that Deb Butterfield and a couple of others are working on getting the bus to come to the library 1 or 2 days a week so that the kids can get there. There are a number of things like that that we're working on already.
So I can update you on some of the projects that we did last year and what's continuing on this year and the things that are new. So last year, when we got back into the schools, one of the things that we started at the high school is I'm working with Deb Butterfield, who we all know is the sweetest woman on earth and loves those kids and will do anything. We've done a couple of projects within the library, but we also did an art extravaganza last spring that was very successful, and we got more of the kids engaged in that. We had over 350 people come through for because we promoted it out to the community. We also had an event at Gardner Main Street where we invited the kids to let us know what they would like to see. So we had a booth for them down at Nietzsche. They got to be introduced to Nietzsche. He's now Jason, it's Jason, right? I think it's Jason. He's got the kids engaged down there doing games. And he was very conscientious. He felt embarrassed that he had gotten some albums and there was some pot leaf stuff. He goes, I don't really like to have this stuff around when the kids are around. Don't worry about it. So the kids gave us great ideas and we're working on those. So Gardner Main Street and the coalition is looking at that list to see what we could do and then to promote it. So one of the things that I'm working with the Interact kids is how do you find out where things are? Because they're like, there's nothing going on. And I was like, you have a free concert every Friday night, all summer. I didn't know that. So we're working on that. We're working on a communications piece because they don't know what's going on. So how do you need to see that? Where do you need to see that? So they're saying posters throughout the school. So we're working on a Christmas one right now that you'll see from Gardner Main Street. There's lots going on downtown and we're going to do one poster and get those posters out. Last fall, actually, we worked with the Yellow Tulip Project. The Yellow Tulip Project works on taking stigma away from mental health issues. And I was blown away by these kids that we did a ceremony and they shared their experiences with anxiety and depression. And so we didn't do another set of tulips this year, but we will next year. And they had sort of a ceremony when all the tulips were up. If anybody enjoyed them as you drove by, there were lots of them at the high school and the middle school. Working closely with Sarah Sims and Hope up at the middle school. This year we're having a blowout of Red Ribbon Week. Red Ribbon Week is October 23rd through the 31st. You're going to be seeing stuff through the community as well as your churches and the banks and all those places. But the middle school is decorated up. They're having a big assembly. We got the kids beach balls so that, you know, they can play with those before we come in. But we've trained 4 young women at the high school, 3 freshmen and 1 high school student, and they will be giving the vaping presentation to the middle school that day, as well as Pat Hart's going to go up and give the kids a proclamation from the town that says the town sees what you're doing. And we also are going to observe Red Ribbon Week and lift you up and make sure that you have what you need instead of substances. Tomorrow we're recording a PSA. So, you know, we're in a small community, so you're going to hear that PSA everywhere. So it's going to be on 98.5 and 92.5 for the week. And it's our J&G kids who are doing a recorded PSA. And at the high school, we're doing it on half day with the teacher conferences. We're doing a project with Deb Butterfield. We're asking community members to come to the school and do demos or an activity or something. We've got 10 people coming in and they vary from doing mindfulness, handwork, to a craft, to photography. My daughter's coming in to do photography. We have one of the ministers from the Christian Life Church on Winter Street. Is that where? He is a professional videographer and he's coming in with his equipment. So Ramsey is coming in to do that. We have Kennebec Land Trust who's coming in to show the kids there's plenty for you to do in this area. And here are the maps. And they're going to be and we have a new shop in town, which I didn't realize. We are the only city besides 2 others in the state of Maine that has a fly tying person. And that's one of the things that the kids asked for. They wanted to learn how to tie flies. She's not going to be able to come to the event, But then the other thing that started with Joanne's extra funding for the summer, we had LGBT afternoons down at the library with a new librarian. And we now have a bus that leaves Thursdays. Is it Thursdays? The bus takes them to the library?
Yes.
I think it's Thursdays. And Deb Butterfield has gotten 20 kids down there. And they're doing activities after school. So this is for high school. And so Justin is open to doing any type of activity they want. So Selena's going to go over to the library and do a session of fly tying and then have them come to her shop. And she actually just got a whole bunch of donations given to her. So she's going to let the kids play with those. So I thought that was pretty cool. So that's what we're doing right now. And then the girls that are helping us came up with an idea. And I went to Chad the other day. I go, so what do you think about this? The girls want to do this. He goes, what do they want to do? And so we have life-size cutout cardboard figure of the Rock. And he is going to be put in different places in the high school with anti-vaping messages. So the girls think that is like the funniest thing. They can't wait to put it out. Chad just authorized the vape saying, so they even researched quotes from the Rock. And then they took his quotes and then twisted them a little bit so it's an anti-vape message. So that's going to grow. They've already got a plan that he's going to have a witch's hat on for Halloween, and they want to do things with him throughout. So don't be surprised to see other cardboard cutouts because the kids were so positive about it. So that's what we've been doing, trying to educate at the same time as making sure the kids know where their protective factors are. We would love to have more parents at the table with a coalition. We're going into year 4. So that means we have this grant for 5 years. We will be applying for it for another 5 years. But the coalition that I have right now, I guarantee I won't have some of those people on it in the coming years, because Carrie Arsenal is my parent rep, and a few others. Law enforcement actually isn't at the table right now because, as you know, Officer Quintana is a bit busy and there's nobody to be at the table. We would love to have someone from the fire department if they wanted to come and just be there and listen. Just saying. But we do have a lot of Rotary support. And now that we're going full barrel, I want to get over to the Elks Club because they actually do a lot of things for families over there. So I need to tie in with them as well, and the churches. So the Gardner Area Ministry Group has been very welcoming for me to go in and educate them. And then I'm going to start doing some coffee hours to see if I can engage some parents. But other than that, it's really hard, as you know, to get parents to come to an event. So if you have something where they have to come, we might be able to tell them some brain development stuff around marijuana and vaping. Definitely 6th grade will be at Flight Night. That's going to happen this year. So hopefully the 6th grade parents will take that back to other parents. I'm going to hit up the parents who are at the elementary level, just because they're parents, and see if we can get some energy around getting some parents educated. I'd like to get into the boosters meeting. I'll wait till after football. I'll go over there, and the music boosters. So those are the kind of the plans, but that, I just wanted to let you know, that's what we are doing behind the scenes with community members. And it is the 4 towns. So one of the things when Joanne said we want kids to be active in their communities, one of the things on our action plan is to get kids educated civically, and they will go to the towns to represent the data. And then, so Rayanne and I are working together, and we actually had 6 kids that raised their hands. So Pat Hart and Greg Kuchar are going to come and teach the kids about the process of City Hall, how that works, council meeting, and how the town works. And then get them appointments to go over and introduce themselves to the town managers and start that education. And I think the 6 that volunteered, I don't have a senior, so we'll have them for a couple of years to do that kind of work with all 4 of the towns. So that's what we need to keep reminding everybody. The grant's not just for Gardner, it's for the region. So to try to find those places in the other towns where we can go. I've been out to the fairgrounds. So, because one of the new laws, just for your information, on marijuana was even if a town opted out of marijuana and there was an event in the town, they can go to the town and ask to sell at that event. So Steve McGee said, no, there will be no marijuana at the fairgrounds. But because Pittston is opted out of any stores. So if you want any questions around marijuana, it's a changing landscape all the time. So I can help you navigate that as well.
A lot of information. Really a lot of information.
So
There's also a drama boosters, just so you know, you can add.
Yeah,
them
oh,
to your
that's right. I
list.
just paid for the year long, yes.
Add them to your list.
The PowerPoint will be available. Yes.
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 Yes, we will post it on their website.
Yeah, and our contact information is on that PowerPoint. If you're an individual who would like questions answered, or if you'd like us to come to your school or a community group you happen to be a part of, or whatever, we really are about engaging the community and trying to figure out what we as a community can do, which is really why we put the pieces about mattering
Right.
in the slides. The more you feel like you matter, and matter is not just recognized, but really adding value to things. So, if we could have interns, we could have middle school and high school work study things. There are all kinds of things that we could do that they saw themselves adding value to.
Right. Oh,
Oh, I'm sorry, Tony.
no, go ahead.
Thank you.
The part that I find interesting is encouraging kids to be civic minded and to be involved in their communities, because I do notice that, I think we all notice that people in government are getting older and older. And our kids really need to understand how things work. And I know we can teach civics and we can talk about civics all day long. But a great way to do it is to just go do it, go and figure it out and find somebody to work with you and walk next to you. So, we really need that so that our kids growing up.
Yeah, and if any teacher had a community service project, then they could engage the kids with a community. We'd be glad to help.
Yeah.
Facilitate that sort of thing.
And everything the kids are doing, they get community service for. So that's the carrot.
There's always a carrot. Yes. That or cake, but
I take the cake.
I would like the cake. Tony, I'm sorry, go
Oh,
ahead.
yeah, and Chris, I think had, but
I was just saying there's other questions.
oh, yeah, right. I appreciate being able to put the positive in there too, the connections that students do feel, if they feel safe in the school, and even to have that one slide that had the one connection to a teacher, they're high numbers. It's not 100%, but it's high. And then to hear the pieces that you were touching on at the end of the Interact group and all the other groups that are doing stuff, that's like really, I was starting to think like, oh yeah, where can we find, student voice in this? And it's sort of being accessed in a bunch of different ways. And I think that's really positive. I think kind of a couple things that stood out to me, just obviously that sort of bump from 8th to 9th, right? Both perceived risk and use. I guess the perceived risk goes down and the use goes up. And maybe not surprised, obviously we've all, kind of know that age and this kind of thing, but that seems sort of like how to look at that transition more, and not to put it all on them, but just to be aware of. And then, one other thing, sort of like that perceived risk, and especially with cannabis, that, right, there's more ER trips happening, and I'm aware that this is part of that, the percentages are going up and the reactions are much less predictable than they might have been at another time. But somehow that messaging isn't coming across yet. And I think there's like, so I'm a social worker, and I'm aware of some of the effects that are happening to kids. And it's like, it's an intoxication. It's like you could fall downstairs and not be able to operate a vehicle in a way that, I don't know, it's easier to to work around in the past, but now there's a real risk of that ER trip. And so sort of getting that messaging out there or to continue to do that, which is part of what this is, but somehow that seems like that's being like, maybe it's, sort of evolving information, I guess. So, where can we tap into that a bit?
We also partner with AdCare and the PTTC, which is the Technical Learning Center for New England. And Scott Gagnon, if you know that name, he's like the expert on legalization of marijuana and all the harmful effects of it. He will be coming to the coalition in November. And if there's anything specific that anybody would like to ask him, he really wants that feedback before he comes in November to see what people need for information. We could actually have him come to the high school or do anything like that. I'm trying to think of many ways to get that number down before the kids take that test again in February.
Right.
So, the bulletin board for the library is all on the risks and harm and brain development around marijuana. So if it went down 5 points, I'd be happy.
The other thing that, to go along with your point, is that there's also been a lot of nicotine overdose with the combination of the cannabis and the nicotine and just the vaping, how easy it is to use a lot of nicotine in a very short time with the pods. And the nicotine can kill you. It's much less likely that you'll die from cannabis, although with the higher THC, the breathing is concerning because it goes way down. But the nicotine can kill you, and the alcohol can kill you. A little overdose, that. So what people are more responsive to in many ways is how bad cannabis is for pets. The number one concern veterinarians have shared with us in the past few years is the intoxication of pets by marijuana. And they have died, they have seizures, brain damage. So
And repeat offenders.
and when
The
we go to
same
them,
fear.
when we go to them and talk about various public health things, we usually go to them on tobacco because for a veterinarian to handle a dog with a lot of third-hand smoke and second-hand smoke, it's very detrimental to the staff, all of that nicotine on the dog or cat or fish or whatever.
Fish petting.
Because there's nicotine in the water for the fish.
Right.
Anyway, that is another place that we have found an opening for people to at least start believing that there's some harm in marijuana, is how many incidents there are with harming pets.
Well, can I just piggyback off of something that Tony said? We do deal as a school district with students using these devices clearly, the marijuana, the nicotine, the vaping, which we are seeing significantly. And Mr. Kempton and I would say we are in situations where we need to meet with families and students when the students are using. And one of the things that I've really seen, notice, and we've talked about sometimes in these meetings with families, is how the students' behavior is actually changing, right? So this sweet, lovely young woman, young man, all of a sudden there are anger issues. There's a significant increase in anxiety, as you said. And after working with families and with the student, once they're off of the device, off of using the marijuana and the nicotine, we hear them say, I've got my child back, right? The child returns back to the child that they know and love. So there really is a very profound, noticeable change in their neurological, right, receptors as a result of using these substances.
Yeah, and they're also constantly in withdrawal. So that's the other piece that people are not really familiar with. Nicotine withdrawal mimics all of the anxiety, stress, depression symptoms. And so if you are addicted to something and craving it and you can't use it for several hours at school, even if you are sneaking around with a vape pen, or several hours at home, you are constantly, not only is there changes in your brain, but then you're constantly in withdrawal as well. And nobody's nice in withdrawal. Just, it's impossible.
Right. Does anybody else have questions?
I thought,
That one.
oh, I thought Angela
Diane.
did at one point.
I was just gonna, I've heard people say, I can't even remember who, but I got into vaping because it's the only thing that kept me from smoking. Nicotine
Yeah.
cigarettes.
So that was a very good marketing campaign by the vaping companies early on. Yeah, and there are different consequences. So in the beginning, we knew that your lungs were, and cancer, and there were all kinds of things that we understood that smoke really implicated. And it appeared that vaping was not contributing the same detrimental things to your health. We have since found it's not the same, it's different.
Right.
And for many people, vaping is more addictive than smoking. So they have indeed changed how much smoke they're putting into their body. But very often, not only have they not quit smoking, so it's around, the last research I read was around 76% of people who try switching to vape to not smoke still smoke. And about 76% of people who started vaping also smoke. So there is a 20-some percent that have left the cigarettes behind or who are not smoking. But there's a very large percentage that co-use between the vape and the smoking, because you can do one someplace and you can't do the other. We didn't look at all tobacco use as a indicator, but all tobacco use, if you look at cigars, cigarettes, vaping, chew, et cetera, is up to 17% in the general population. That's the non-LGBT. So I have a lot of data in my office on what's up with the LGBT kids and what's the non-LGBT kids. So the non-LGBT kids, which is 80% of the kids, 75 to 80% of the kids, 17.9% are using some tobacco product in the last month. So we're down to smoking is 3 or 5 or 6%, depending on who you're looking at. But we still have 17% using some sort of nicotine product. So you're still addicted and you still can't put it down and you're still spending your money on it. So your health consequences are different, but the rest of it is pretty much the same. It's also, all the research shows it doesn't really help you quit smoking. So there are, FDA approved ways to quit smoking. And the helpline, Maine does have one of the best records in the country for helping people quit smoking. But they've now gone, used to be that people tried 17 times before they actually quit. 7, then was 17. Now they're up to saying people who quit long-term have tried up to 30 times before they're successful. So we keep telling people don't quit. Don't quit till the magic happens. It's a very addictive product.
Yes. They're very profitable, but
Yeah, and very profitable.
Yeah,
very profitable.
I do have a question, but I want other people to be able to ask questions if they have them.
I got a question.
Go.
How long have you guys been, or how long has Maine been doing this study? Like over how many years?
We used to do just the set of questions that the federal government did. So we did the youth risk behavior survey.
Mhm.
And we did another set of questions around substance use. It's only since 2009 did we combine 3 or 4 different risk surveys into the main integrated youth health survey. So the data that we can compare is just since 2009. But some of the data was collected, I don't think it's 20 years.
Yeah,
Is it 20?
YRBS, yeah.
Yeah, the YRBS was 20 years ago. So, but it's not the same exact question or the.
Well, and vaping wasn't a thing back then, but I was just wondering if you guys have seen a noticeable, taking vaping out of the equation, but even the kids who identify LGBT versus, and obviously that's.
So
gonna be much
2009
more
was the
prevalent
first
now.
time they asked about LG and B. And lesbian and gay is one category, which I've always found odd, but they put lesbian and gay together as one category. And then bisexual. So that was in 2009. 2013, they added transgender. And then they added, no, that was 2017, they added transgender. So they've only been trending the LGB and the trans since 2017. So we have 4 years for 3 different series of tests. And some of the questions have changed anyway. So even the way they ask questions now, it used to be, the question was, I don't really understand the question, or I'm not sure, right? Now there's a different question added in that says, I don't describe my sexuality that way. So now there's 5% that do not identify as heterosexual, gay, lesbian, or bisexual. That could be the kids that are calling themselves non-binary, or another sort. I mean, there's a lot of terms kids use. And that's actually not unusual that kids are exploring those kinds of issues in middle school and high school anyway. But now they have a lot more words that they're using in order to identify. So that trend of lesbian and gay, we're one of the first states that did it consistently. So we're one of the first states that had that data. And even now, most states do not collect as much data on sexual identity and gender identity as we do. The Public Health Department prioritized it about before 2010 because of health disparities.
Okay.
Angela.
I have so many questions, but I'm going to narrow it down to I think this one. Which is kind of 2-part. One, you started out with THC talking about, like, when some of us were younger, the 4%, right? All the way up to 22% or 30%, 40%. Okay. So can you, the first response I'm looking for is, can you just clarify what that actually does when you take that in? Like, what's the difference in that when the intensity is increased? What is that like? What's the real impact of that from, like, the people who might have tried this under 4% and have that perception, and maybe haven't tried it since then,
Right.
and you're like, that sounds like a lot, but what does it actually then turn into? And then the second question I have is, Maine had a lot to do with, like, an anti-smoking campaign and all that sort of stuff. And now we have the vaping product, and we see a lot of people in cars vaping. We have a lot of anti-smoking with your kids in the car situation, but now we have a lot of vaping and vaping with kids in the car. And we kind of skipped that conversation and went to pets are actually dying or getting very, very sick, being in a house where the smoke is present, or the fumes or whatever it is present. That's a pet in a bigger house or a bigger unit. Then we have little kids in cars where that same practice is happening. What's going on there? So the first is the intent.
Getting into the tobacco question. So technically, vaping is included in the no smoking in cars with kids. So smoking in most laws means using a tobacco product. So the problem is, there's no way to enforce it. I mean, law enforcement, for one thing, is under staff all over the place. And so you can't enforce it. But we also don't even talk about it anymore, which I do think is a big gap, that we don't talk about the fact that it's illegal to smoke a joint in public. I mean, people know you can't drink in public, outside and, in a public space, but a lot of people do not know you can't use marijuana in a public space.
And I'm just also thinking, like, it's a closed unit. I'm vaping, like, I'm not, but if I was vaping in a car, nicotine or cannabis in a closed car, driving or sitting in a closed car, and I have kids buckled up in the back seat, what is the secondary impact on them?
They are smoking or vaping as well.
And so what does that do? And then what does it do when you go from 4% back in the day to 22 to 30%
I hope they're
now?
not driving while they're using.
Right.
that
Well, of
level
course.
marijuana,
Yeah.
One thing.
And we are trying to, like, we're trying to educate our Head Start parents. That's a big complaint with Head Start staff. We need more information. So I get them information all the time about secondhand smoke and smoke in the vehicle. And it includes vaping, marijuana, and cigarettes, because they need specific information, because they think vaping's safe. So
Marijuana's safe.
right now, because this has only happened since 2015, vaping, our studies aren't caught up yet. And we had COVID. So I think though, well, the research that we're seeing because of our experience with tobacco, I think it's going to be accelerated around the effects of all these, because you got to think these are oils too that are going into the lungs.
So, and I'd like to, the 20, so if we went from 4% to 20%, it's like having, how fast can you smoke 5 joints instead of 1?
And that 22, 28, 23, 28%, that's one hit, you're high. Where that 4% was a whole joint.
That's what I think
Yeah,
I needed to
it's
hear for
one
that
hit.
like comparison.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if it went from 4 to 80, it's 20 joints as fast as you can get them into you.
And so some of the parents, when we talk about that, well, it's not any worse than alcohol. Well,
It's different.
discussing drinking a beer and discussing having moonshine, you know, that's the example that you kind of need to say is that you're not going to promote having your child drink moonshine, are you? Well, we shouldn't be having that high intense THC on a regular basis.
Which, by the way, the whole alcohol thing is you can't predict how much alcohol you're getting anymore either. Just because it's a beer doesn't mean they're all the same value.
No,
Right.
they're not the same anymore.
Because they go from 4 to, I think there's some IPAs downtown that are almost 11%.
12.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
It's tough, but it's a less extreme than, you know, can you finish off 20 joints in 15 minutes?
Yeah, that's a helpful visual for me. Thank you.
and the edible things, it's very dangerous too, because it's one of those things that creeps up, and then because they haven't waited, they've eaten even more.
Diane?
I just, I don't know a lot about these things either, and I read the papers and I understand this, our state has been putting more money into places, addiction places people can go instead of being arrested for the hard drugs and the Oxycontin and the rise in deaths from these things and how concerned we are. But if you had a young person of any age into their early 20s who is addicted to marijuana or cannabis, and it, I don't know the percentage of that. We always hear it's not as bad as alcohol or some of those things, or hard drugs. Are those centers attuned to helping people?
So
with
the harm
marijuana?
reduction centers would not be working with young people on marijuana.
Mm-mm.
Those are totally opiate harm reduction interventions.
Yeah,
So they would not be marijuana, tobacco, alcohol, that just, you wouldn't find a young person there. We do have a huge lack of treatment for young people with any kind of substance use or co-substance use and mental health. We still are very understaffed, under-resourced. The number one substance, though, almost always a youth has multiple substances by the time they get into any kind of treatment. But marijuana is the most consistent drug that is causing problems in their lives in treatment in Maine. That's when you read the data about who's being treated for what. Marijuana is the number one.
and who can treat them social?
So there are
workers?
substance use, there are LADCs, licensed alcohol drug counselors. They're paid very poorly on Medicaid. I mean, part of the problem is the lack of payment for it, but also the lack, it's kind of like there aren't enough teachers, there aren't enough treatment providers. And, you know, there aren't enough counselors in general. For youth in particular, well, I don't know, it's all ages, just not enough substance use treatment providers. And I think Day One is still the number one in southern half of Maine, still the number one provider, and they have a handful of beds really. And a lot of kids need residential care.
Did you have a question? Then I'm gonna ask him a question. How do you think the legalization of marijuana has affected? So now that marijuana is legal and it's regulated, right? And it's regulated
One side is
for,
regulated.
the medical side is regulated, not regulated. What part is regulated?
There's
Adult
more
use.
regulation on the adult
Adult
use.
Adult use.
There is really wonky, strange regulations with medical use.
So
Wonky. That's my technical.
wonky is
term.
good, I like that word. So is having it legalized easier than not legally?
So what we know is the increased access to any substance means there's increased use,
Right.
right? And it doesn't have to be that any legal entity is selling it to somebody that's not legal to purchase it. It's, I buy whatever I buy and I put it on the shelf in my home. You know, that's how kids get a beer. It's out of the refrigerator. I mean, that's a very common way. So or if you're growing it in your backyard,
Right.
you know, we had a focus group tell us once, you know, we don't have to get it from anybody. We just pick it as we walk home. You know, so it's like, oh, good, that's good. But so we do know that part of the legalization was the promotion over and over again in signs, on television, in the newspaper, that it was safe. Now we have a constant chatter about it.
Right.
So legalization, the retail stores entered downtown Gardner in 2020. The difference between 19 and 21 about use of marijuana didn't change. The perception of it being safe. So the reason we worry about that high perception of it, no risk, is that people are more likely to use more if they try it. You know, the concern. So the other concern we have is that it is so wonky, it's hard to really prosecute anything that's illegal.
Right.
So it's harder to keep operating under the influence charge all the way through to conviction because you don't have a blood alcohol level. You know, some people keep marijuana in their system differently at different levels, even though they smoked. There's just, you know, this long, complicated way. And then you have to document it. And then you still don't have that blood alcohol level 0.08.
Right. Yep.
You know? So the concerns really are more about it's in the environment and it's more accessible and people don't think it's harmful.
And the higher potency
And the higher
products.
So that makes me have another, may I ask one more question, then I'll try and be done. So, you know, you said those little tiny bottles of alcohol, right? Nips, yes. Well, there come a day, when we don't need to have marijuana stores anymore, but that will be inside the case at Cumberland Farms and.
It is indeed possible. It is indeed possible.
Well, so the other product we didn't even discuss is CBD and kratom.
Sorry?
Yes. So when you go to all the local convenience stores, you're going to see CBD products and you may see kratom products.
What's kratom?
That's a whole other education realm, but it's a synthetic marijuana that is actually quite poisonous. And it's being sold at the bottom of the hill. It's being sold at the Sunoco station.
Is it a plant?
It is a plant, but it has a lot of man-made things in it. And the kids can get it quite cheaply. And we are lucky in this area that they haven't really caught on to this. But in other states, Connecticut and New York, they are having horrible emergency room visits with these kids on kratom. And the DEA agent is telling us that there's more stuff coming up. So we'll be educated on that in February. So we'll have more products to tell you about. But the CBD in the stores isn't supposed to have THC, but it actually does. It has what's called Delta 8. So Delta 9 is what's in regular THC marijuana. It's Delta 8 that's in CBD. So you can get affected by some of those products that are over the counter, if they have Delta 8.
And if anybody has a blood test and can't go stay in their job because they have marijuana, if they're a heavy user of like CBD cream or whatever, and it happens to be one of those products with high 8, it'll
There'll be
show up
positive
as
test.
using. Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. Whoa.
But if you have a
So it's a whole
medical card, they
different
can't
culture.
fire you, right?
Well,
Right.
no, they can. They can.
If it says no.
If you have, if the business does any interstate travel, if it does any
Driving.
federal contracts, if you work for school, I mean, there are many jobs that if you tested positive, even with a medical card, you're not allowed to be high, you're not allowed to have the substance in you and you are gone.
Right. Certain hospitals, Southern Maine, Maine Med, if you have it in your system, you can't.
I think you
Recruiters are
can't
having a
get-
problem.
Pardon
Yeah,
me?
school bus drivers, you can't hire a school bus driver if they have a positive test.
Yeah, no, government.
So there's there's a lot of positions where if you have any THC in your system. when
It's
you're-
interesting. Some do, some medical places do, and some medical don't even check. It's
Right,
very
and there's
interesting.
businesses that they'll just, you can still work there. Education.
So again, we are available, our office is on Mechanic Street,
So many more questions.
come on over, bring a cup of coffee.
Bring you one?
Give me
Bring
some
my own.
ideas where we can share the information with
Yeah.
parents.
But
Get
we
parents on board.
really are available to change our schedules, to figure out what needs. We have a budget that we can play with a little bit around, hire a speaker. Although I have to say hiring a speaker rarely makes a big difference,
Yeah.
other than get people's attention.
Right.
So, but we do have some ways in which we could support either the school. So the Maine Resilience Building Network has a conference in the spring. We can pay for 3 people to go.
Cool.
We, there are some things like that that we can help support, whether it's at the elementary level, middle school level, or high school level. It's just building those ways to support the community and build resilience. Because the number one substance use prevention strategy is engage the kids, make them feel like they matter, improve, the number of ways that they are feeling valued.
I think the pandemic, COVID really helped for that to not happen.
Right.
And I think about our kids who are first and second year college students who went the first year through the pandemic. And there's lots of them that have had varying degrees of success because they didn't ever meet their teachers and they ate their meals in a room by themselves and all those things, all the social pieces. And I also, the curiosity for me also is around the legalization of it and of marijuana and how, but what you say makes sense. It allowed for marketing to go on steroids.
So we know really in substance use prevention is a science. There
Right.
are a lot of things we know that will impact use. So if there's no consequence, for instance, then use goes up.
Yep.
If there's consequences, but nobody else knows, use goes up.
Right.
So if there's more signs that promote something or people seen using it. So part of the reason you have tobacco-free ball fields, for instance, was so that the kids didn't see people. So it denormalized it,
Right.
right? So what normalizes it? What are the community norms? If the community norms are accept a drink every day, that a youth will believe a drink every day, whether it's one, and that's not problem drinking for most people, but it does normalize it in a
Right.
different way. If family night is in the pub as opposed to a different environment. Now, we know all of those things do increase the likelihood of youth use.
Interesting. Yeah. And alcohol for women, who would have thought?
And if you want an eye opener, go to the website for the Office of Cannabis Policy and you'll know why we have cannabis. All the data is there on how much money is being made. And you can find out where the compliance end of it is. If you see some outrageous things happening, they're the ones who handle all that kind of compliance stuff. Our local law enforcement does not. And that website changes monthly, so you know in your region what's going on. So their website for education for parents and kids is called Unclouded. And that's all focusing on the effects of marijuana on the brain. But you wouldn't know it was the Office of Cannabis Policy because there's no indicator there that they're the ones who put that up.
Love it. Interesting.
It's a sneaky website.
Anyone else have a question? Thank you so very much for sharing this information with us. Really appreciate it. Thank you, administrators, everybody for being here.
Well, and
tonight.
thank you for having the kids take the test, because there are school districts that don't take it.
You don't know what you don't ask.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
For our kids.
Thank you, guys.
That I don't know. Joanne, the test is a computer